back again, this time with the Bookish A to Z Hot or Not tag. So this is a tag created by Greg over at Another Bibliophile Reads, and I'll have Greg's channel linked down in my description. So the first prompt is audiobooks. I'm going to say hot. So it took me about 3 years before I was really able to get into audiobooks. I wanted to like audiobooks, but I really struggled with this idea of somebody else interpreting a book for me and not reading the book and interpreting it how it should sound and how it should read myself. So it did take me quite some time to get that all figured out. And then at the beginning of this year or the very end of last year, all of a sudden it just kicked in for me. And now I always have an audiobook going. I always have an audiobook going and a real book going. Bildungsroman. I should have looked that up before I started this video, but I didn't. I'll put it on the screen here so you can see it. So dealing with a person's formative years or spiritual education. I'm going to say not, because I cannot think of a book with that theme that I've read, let alone a book with that theme that I've enjoyed. The next one is children's books. Hot. I do like to read children's and middle grade books. I don't read them constantly, but I do read, 2 or 3 a year. Digital. Hot. Yes. I do prefer actual books that I can put my hands on. I like physical books. Best, of course. However, the convenience of having lots of books on my Kindle that I can take when I'm on a trip or I'm traveling it's just too convenient to be denied. So hot. I'm a fan. Experimental. You know what? I don't even know that I can have an opinion on this because I've never read an experimental book that I can think of. I do have a couple. I have this one book, I forgot what it's called, but it has something to do with hopscotch. And then I also have this book called The Republic of Bats, which is another experimental book, but I haven't read it yet, so I don't know if I'm going to like it, even though it looks awesome. So I'm going to have to not answer this one because I don't know. The next one is fantasy. I'm going to say hot on fantasy. I do like fantasy, but I am a lot more picky about the kind of fantasy that I enjoy. I enjoy a much more narrow range of fantasy than I do most other genres. Graphic novels. I've tried a number of graphic novels and I've just never been able to like graphic novels. It's just I have a very hard time extracting a story from a series of images that have very little text to explain what's going on. I often feel like when I'm reading a graphic novel, there's a lot of jumping around and it just seems to jump around very suddenly, and it's sudden enough for me without any sort of explanation that I frequently have trouble following what's going on and often find myself lost. However, this year I did finally find a series of graphic novels that I do like. It's called Killing Stalking. It's an absolutely warped horror type story. So I don't actually know how to answer that. So we're just going to go with hot because there is one graphic novel series that I like. The next one is horror. I'll say hot. Horror's not my favorite genre, and I had really not read hardly any horror throughout my entire life. And a few years ago, I decided I was going to explore horror. And I spent about 2 years reading quite a number of horror novels. And so I do like horror novels, but it did take me a while to figure out what kinds of horror novels I like. So I definitely don't like really gory kinds of horror. So if it's slashery and there's a bunch of killing and blood and gore and all that, I don't go in for that kind of horror. And then inspirational. So I'm not exactly sure what Greg means by inspirational. If he's referring to, religious type of texts, that's a not on me. I don't enjoy reading religious texts very often. There are exceptions, of course. If he means books that I've read that make me feel really hopeful and sort of inspired in some way, we'll say hot because there have been a handful of those for me. The next prompt is journalism. So we'll say hot. There has been a number of journalistic pieces that I have enjoyed. Library. I'm going to say not. And not because I dislike libraries. I like libraries. The problem is in my town, my library is awful. It's very old and it kind of has this gloomy, like cloudy day kind of feel when you go in there. Libraries in general are hot, but my public library is not. Mystery. Hot. I do love a mystery story. Nonfiction hot. I do read a number of nonfiction and I would like to read more. Omnibus. Hot. Yes, I love omnibus / bind-ups. Love it. If I can get an entire series in one book, I'm all for it. Poetry. I'm going to say not. I'm not big on poetry. There are exceptions. I love Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. I have a book of Longfellow's poems, and I have enjoyed a number of those. But just as a general rule, no. I think I just like poems more if they're stories. I think I like them more than just the short, really rhyming poetry. Quests. When the protagonist goes on a quest, physical or spiritual. We'll say hot. There's been a number of that kind of book I like, especially in the fantasy genre. Romance. Okay, that's another iffy one. So I'm not a romance reader, really. I was when I was young. I probably stopped reading romance novels between the ages of 27 and 30. But then last year, because of my association with the Bookish Bryants, Becky is a huge romance reader. She has actually inspired me to pick up some romances. So now I have read a number of romances in the last year. So I guess we'll say hot since I have enjoyed some. Science fiction, hot. Burning, scalding hot, lava flowing hot. That's my favorite kind of book. My favorite genre. Translation. Books translated from one language to another. We'll say hot. I have a number of translated books, and I have enjoyed many of them. Übermensch. Übermensch? I'm not sure what that word is. The Superman or the Extraordinary Man. Characters who can do everything. Not. I don't have a tendency to like that, although there are exceptions. I absolutely love John Carter from the Barsoom series, and he can do everything. Victorian. Literature from 1837 to 1901 hot. There are a number of books that were written in the Victorian era that I absolutely love. Westerns. Not. I do not enjoy Westerns. In fact, there's only been one Western that I've ever read that I liked, and that was True Grit. And I've only read a few others, and I don't like that genre. X-rated. Hot. Yes, I am an erotica reader. I may not like the romance all that much, but I love erotica. If my jaw is dropping to the ground, then I'm probably going to enjoy it. Young adult, not at all. Of course, there are exceptions, but I do not like YA. No. Zeitgeist, spirit or mood of the times. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example of that. I don't have an example, nothing's coming to mind, but I would probably enjoy a book that embodied the mood or spirit of a certain era. Okay, that's the last prompt. So I'll call that the end of the video, and don't forget to check out Greg's channel.